Okay, welcome back, class. We've done a good job so far working with species 1. You've learned how to compose a counterpoint above a cantus firmus and below a cantus firmus. You might have made a couple mistakes here and there, but again, the whole purpose of this is just to get a good foundation for species counterpoint. I'm not expecting that you'll be masters of counterpoint right away, but this is a good introduction to it. Okay, so when you're feeling ready, let's go on. This is species 2. So what does that mean? Well, I mentioned in my introduction to species counterpoint that, well, what is species? Species is a series of steps where each step is adding another layer, another complexity. Well, we already learned about one-to-one counterpoint, which is writing one note of counterpoint against one note of the cantus firmus. Well, you guessed it. Species 2 is 2-to-1 counterpoint, meaning you're writing two notes against one note. You'll be writing two notes of counterpoint against one note in the cantus firmus. Remember, cantus firmus is this fixed melody. We cannot change that melody. But the composer, you're learning to be a composer in this style, the 16th century style. Okay, so let's analyze first before we learn how to write. We should see, okay, what are the basics? How does it work? Okay, let me play this short melody for you. Okay. All right, here we go. Now it's working. Okay, perhaps if I play it a bit faster, you can hear that there's one note in my right hand, or let's say sopranos are singing this, and there are two notes in my left hand, let's say the tenors. Okay, I think you're able to hear that now. Okay, there's a lot more activity going on in this species 2. Okay, let's analyze deeper what's going on. Now, the way your textbook writes its intervals, it's a little bit different than the way I would like you to learn it. I think there's a good reason to learn first, and the way I'm teaching you is the way it's taught at many universities. So might as well learn it this way because you'll probably encounter it again. So every time you see a perfect interval, you're going to circle it, right? We know that already from our species 1 experience. So, here's unison. Let's circle that. Okay, here's a fifth. Is it a diminished fifth or is it perfect fifth? Well, that's B flat to F. Right, okay, that's a perfect fifth here. Okay, so it's always good to check because every now and then you find, oh, that's not a perfect fifth, that's a diminished fifth. Oh, this is A to E, okay. Right, perfect fifth. Okay, what else? Yes, octave G to G. Okay, what about here? Oh, here we have B flat to F again. Right, here's, okay, D to A. Right, okay. If you know your 5-finger patterns, those come in handy for checking that. Or hopefully you know your scales as well, all 12 major, 12 minor scales. That would be very useful. G to G, okay. And then unison. Now, this is interesting because, well, some people might have trouble seeing that there are two intervals in each measure. Well, it's as if you have this D, let's say, and another D here. It would be the same idea. In essence, we're tying these two Ds together, so we're holding them throughout the whole bar. So if that's an easier way to picture, wait, how is it that we have two different intervals in one measure? Well, that might be an easier way to imagine that. Okay. Now you'll notice your textbook circles these other intervals that are not perfect unison, perfect fifth, perfect octave. What are they? Well, it says it right there on the page, right? But I'll play it slowly for you and let's see if you can hear it. We have two notes at the same time that are not very pleasing. They're a bit unstable. In fact, maybe you know this piece, right? Okay, that's closer to a joke than anything, but that is the same interval, the major second. It's kind of unstable. It wants to resolve. It wants to spread out, or perhaps contract to the unison. So this is our dissonance. Okay. So in species 2, we're allowed to have dissonance. Okay, this is actually good news because we have more options. Okay, so for dissonance, we're not going to circle. Again, this is a different technique I'm showing you. We're going to put triangles for dissonances. Okay. All right. So what are dissonances then? Well, basically, they're not imperfect consonances and they're not perfect consonances. So that leaves out, what are the perfect consonances, right? Unison, fifth, octave. Okay, those are the perfect harmonic intervals. Okay. What about the imperfect consonances? Right, those are thirds and sixths. What does that leave? Well, we have seconds. Yes, we have fourths. Remember that fourths are a little bit curious because right now we're talking about harmonic intervals, which means at the same time. But if you have a melodic fourth, let's say, oh, we have one right here, D to G, that's certainly fine. That's not dissonant. Right? That leap of a fourth is completely fine. So when we're talking about the fourth as a dissonance, I mean it as that we're talking about that it's harmonic. Okay, so let's continue. What else are we on the lookout for? These are imperfect consonances. Oh, okay, here we go. Diminished fifth. So it's not the perfect fifth, it's the diminished fifth. Try this out on the keyboard. We have a B natural against an F. Right? While you can certainly hear this is not as stable as, let's say, B flat to F. That's a perfect fifth, diminished fifth. Why is it diminished if we're raising this? Think about it for a moment. Why is it diminished if we're raising this note? We'll try it out on the keyboard. B flat to F. It's a perfect fifth. Right? It just sounds very pure, isn't it? Those two notes get along very well, very stable. When we alter the bottom note, it becomes closer to the top note. When we alter the bottom note, when we raise it, it becomes closer, meaning that the space between the two is getting smaller. This is why we call it diminished, because we're diminishing that space between the two. All right, let's say if it went the other direction, right, that would be getting larger. Okay, so this is diminished fifth because of that. Sometimes it's hard to see, especially when the counterpoint is below the cantus firmus. It might be a little confusing. Okay, and I didn't see any sevenths, but these are also an option. So let's review quickly what's possible here. Okay, so perfect intervals, right? Perfect consonances. All right, include perfect unison. And we're talking about harmonic intervals here. Okay, and I'll make a note of that. So harmonic intervals. You might want to write this out for yourself. Okay, let's say imperfect consonances. All right, and those would be your thirds and your sixths. Doesn't matter if it's minor or major, they're still imperfect and they're still consonances. We don't treat, let's say, minor thirds or minor sixths as dissonance. Okay, and then you have your dissonances. All right, so these are going to be your seconds, your fourths, and your sevenths. Okay, we didn't have any sevenths in this exercise, but they do exist, and you will find them. In fact, you might be writing them soon. Now, a good question for you all, and you can pause the video if you want to spend some more time pondering this. Where do those dissonances occur? Take a look from the beginning to the end. In fact, how about this? I'll play it one more time. And in that time, try to realize, where do the dissonances occur. Okay, here it is from the beginning. Okay, did you figure it out? Okay, probably you notice that in every measure where there is a dissonance, it's in the second half of the bar. Here it is on the weak beat. Here it is again on the weak beat. We have dissonance. Here we are again, dissonance on the weak beat. What do we know about species 2? Well, if we have dissonance, it's going to be on the weak beat, not the strong beat. Right? Every measure has the strong and the weak. The downbeat, the first beat, is going to be strong. Okay, this is really good to know about a basic rule of species 2. All right. What else could we tell from this exercise? How about the perfect consonances? Go ahead and look through. Again, I'll give you a moment. Let me play through it one more time and tell me where the perfect consonance is. Okay, and as you can see, well, we have at the beginning, we have at the end, we start with unison. You don't have to start with unison, but that's certainly a good option when you're writing the counterpoint right below the Cantus Firmus here. Okay. Okay, other instances. Here's a perfect consonance, and look how it's being approached. One voice is moving down by step, the other is skipping. This is completely fine. They're going in contrary motion, and they're not both leaping. If they're both leaping, let's say, right here, you can really hear leaping to the octave was quite startling. Really was accented. The fact that you have stepwise motion here, totally fine. What else? Here we have perfect consonants on the weak beat. So it doesn't have to be on the strong beat, does it? Okay, this is good to know. And notice, again, if you're having trouble visualizing, well, how is this a fifth again? You could picture another E here being tied over. Okay, A to T. Okay, I see. And then you can see all the notes as they move. Okay, so this is right. Okay, so this would be called oblique motion here, or one voice is moving and the other voice is holding. Okay, oblique motion. And then you have a voice stepping up, voice stepping down. That's contrary motion. Okay, so we're good. It's all right to have perfect consonances on the weak beat, and we're not getting into any kind of trouble. Where we might get into trouble is if, let's say, you had another. Let's say we made this a fifth here. Okay, let's put 2 back-to-back fifths. Okay. Well, this is where we could get into trouble. Let me play that again slower. Do you hear that perfect fifth? Again, in this style, we're avoiding parallel fifths, parallel unisons, parallel octaves, because they have a way of accenting, of bringing us out of that smooth, beautiful, flowing line, of creating a punctuation. We want to avoid that in this style. Okay, so I think this was a good idea to go in contrary motion here, away from that fifth. Here we have another octave, and again, if you're having trouble visualizing, well, how does this move? You can picture it being tied over, and then you might see, okay, so this is leaping up fourth here, and this is stepping down. So again, we're approaching this perfect consonance in contrary motion. Okay, I think we're safe here. Okay, this is good. So this was a similar kind of idea. All right, so we're good there. So what do we know so far? This is more of the same here. Perfect consonances on the weak beat, totally fine. And we're ending with the unison. We started with the unison. It's not a bad idea to end with it too. And in that way, if you look at the overall line, Here you see that we descend, descend, descend. We make a nice low point, and then we come back up. All right, so this is the sort of shape you want in general. So either often with the counterpoint below the cantus firmus, you'll have a low peak, almost like you start at the top of a mountain, you go down to the valley, and then you go back to another peak of the next mountain. Okay, which is at the same level. Okay, there you have it, your metaphor for the day, your hiking metaphor. All right, what else could we tell? Well, what about imperfect consonances? Oh, well, those are also fine. Those we find, right, we can find them on the weak beat or on the strong beat. So what can we say about some basic rules about species counterpoint so far then? Okay, so consonances can occur on strong or weak beats. Okay, this is good. It gives us a lot of options. Dissonances can only, this is good to know, only occur on weak beats. All right, those are two big guidelines, two big guideposts that you should use when you are composing a species 2 exercise. Okay. And there's one more aspect that I want to go over that I want to point out in this. Every time there is a dissonance, as we see here we have a second, remember, here we have a fourth. What do you notice? How are they moving? How are the voices moving? Well, let's look at that counterpoint. So here we have do, te, le, so. Okay, so this is stepwise. Okay, good to know. How about over here? Le, so, fa. Okay, again, stepwise. How about over here? Right, we had the tritone. So, la, ti. Okay, again, stepwise. Okay, I think I'm picking up on this rule, this general guideline that if we do have dissonance, it's going to be in stepwise motion. In fact, some textbooks will say, well, actually, you can only use passing motion, which means that it's continuing on in the same direction. Continuing on in the same direction. This is really the most common, and most textbooks will say that. Your textbook says that neighboring motion is all right. It's also a form of stepwise motion. It's very easily sung. We'll go over that idea of neighboring motion. For now, let's just say all dissonance must be stepwise. Okay, so dissonances can only occur on weak beats and must be stepwise. Okay, so you don't want to leap to a dissonance or leap out of a dissonance. There should be no leaping. Picture it as that commute that you have from your home to the train and then to school, let's say, or to work. Well, we want that to be as smooth as possible. We don't want to be leaping over anything, right? We want a smooth transition from place to place. Okay, there you have it, a transportation metaphor for the day. All right, so this is a good place to go over to. Let's take a look at try it number 1. Okay, this says, analyze the harmonic intervals of the counterpoint below by writing the interval numbers between the staves and circling the ones that are dissonant. Actually, I'm going to change this to putting a triangle around the ones that are dissonant. Okay. Locate and label one additional passing tone. Okay, passing tone, and 2 neighbor tones for consonant skips. Okay, so they put a circle here. We're going to put triangles. And what else? We're also going to circle any perfect consonants. Why are we using these two different techniques? Well, I should say it's one technique, but 2 different shapes that we're using. Well, because both perfect consonances and dissonances cause problems. If you're composing a counterpoint and you write two back-to-back perfect perfect consonances, you will probably catch that mistake if you circle them. If you don't circle them, you might not see it. So this is why we're circling. What about dissonance? Well, again, if you have a dissonance here and you put a triangle around it, that's you're reminding yourself, okay, this goes in the weak beat, and I definitely will not ever see, I should never see two back-to-back triangles. Okay. All right, so that's why we're using those two different shapes. Now, in order to complete this well, we need to define a couple things. We know passing motion, but we need to look at neighboring motion because this is potentially a new idea for you. So remember, passing motion, here's another example. I'll go ahead and play this for you so you can have it in your ears a little bit. Okay, these exercises suddenly become a lot busier, don't they? Because we have more notes to consider. Now, again, just to stay consistent, first thing I'm going to do is put circles in the appropriate place, triangles around the appropriate intervals. You can do this at home. You could go to your textbook. This is on page 185. And you could practice doing the same thing if you'd like. Octave, octave. Okay. Here's that seventh. All right, we didn't see a seventh yet. Okay, yeah, this is perfect fifth, perfect unison. Okay, so now I have all my circles, my triangles. Okay, now why don't we just identify when we do have a dissonance, what is it? Okay, here's the first instance from measure 3 to 4. We have this fourth. Let's play it. So it's always a good idea to try this at the keyboard. I see. So the Cantus Firmus is skipping down, and my counterpoint. There we go. Okay. Seems very smooth. Seems like it's very easy to sing. Okay, and it's also going in the same direction. So what do we know? Oh, that's called passing motion, where we have a dissonance that's passing between two consonances. Here's a consonance, here's a consonance, and this is passing between them. Okay, this is good to know. That's the definition. Passing. What about this next dissonance here? Okay, let's play it on the keyboard. Again, very easy to sing. It's stepwise. It's just stepping up, stepping back, but it does not continue in the same direction. The same direction would have gone up. Now, this composer could have done that. That actually would have worked fine. But they decided, well, actually, I want to come back to that same note. This is F. This is F. And in between, we have stepwise motion, stepping up, stepping back. So in order for us to have a neighbor, we have to either step up and step back, or the opposite. You can step down and step back up. Excuse me. So picture, let's say, if you live in an apartment building on, my last apartment, I used to live on the 3rd floor. All right, it was a apartment building that had 6 floors to it. Quite often, unfortunately, I used to have to go downstairs and say, "Excuse me, can you turn down your video games? I'm trying to sleep." There would be explosions going off, and I'd have to go down. At least it seemed like once a month. I'd say, "Can you please turn it down?" That was my lower neighbor. So notice I started at my apartment, I walked downstairs, and I came back up. That's lower neighbor. All right. What about my upper neighbor? Well, unfortunately, this is a true story. He was a musician who used to love to practice in the middle of the night. He would plug in his guitar and be playing until 1 a.m., 2 a.m. And that was in the living room, but okay, every now and then it would kind of bother us. So I would walk upstairs every now and then. "Excuse me, can you please turn off your guitar. It's keeping us awake. And notice I started at my apartment, walked upstairs, came back. That's my upper neighbor. So that's a good metaphor for you, especially for New Yorkers. We can all relate to neighbors. This is your upper neighbor that you had to go visit, and then you come back. If you're coming back to the same place, that's a neighbor. Okay. UN doesn't stand for United Nations. In this case, it stands for upper neighbor. Oh, what about here? Well, here we have a consonance. This is interesting. But it is true that we can consider this a lower neighbor, stepping down, stepping back up. I don't want to confuse you too much because we're mainly just talking about dissonance and how we can use dissonance. So let's continue to look at the dissonance in this. Okay, let's look at, here's measures 10 to 11. So in your right hand, or the let's say the sopranos are going mi, re, do, right? And the tenors, let's say, are singing so, fa, so, ti, do. And you put it together. Ah, such a great cadence there. Really has a sense of completion. Notice that we have a dissonance in the right place. It's in the weak beat. It's on the second beat. Okay. But what is it? Well, this is not continuing in the same motion, is it? We start on G. So let's call this our home base for a moment. We end on G. Ah, okay. We had to step down to the lower neighbor. Excuse me. Can you please turn down your video games? And then you step up and you go back to sleep. Okay. Right. That's the lower neighbor. So LN means lower neighbor. Okay, so I think we've successfully defined what is passing motion, what is neighboring motion, upper neighbor versus lower neighbor. What if, oh, let's look at this cadence here because this is important. What if you don't have stepwise motion at all? What if, are you allowed to skip to a consonance? Well, yes, of course. This actually works very nicely, skipping up. In fact, we need to get to that leading tone, don't we? As we're about to find out, there are two different ways to end an exercise, but I'll save that for a couple of minutes from now. So this is a good review page for you to be ready for this try it number 1. Okay, so take a moment. Well, you could take a few minutes now and get started on this, or you could wait till the end of the video. Okay, whatever works for you. And again, don't forget, we need to circle the perfect consonances and put triangles around the dissonance. Okay, and when you're ready, there's one more thing I'd like to introduce to you before I send you off on your merry way. We won't be composing species 2 exercises quite yet because we're not quite ready, but I would like to see different ways of ending exercises. So let's take a look at some options. So what do we see so far? Let's go back to our first example. Remember, here we had a piece in D minor, starts and ends on D. Okay, remember that the Cantus Firmus is in the top voice, the counterpoint is in the lower voice. So this is re, do, or scale degree 2, going to scale degree 1. And this is T, do. Okay, scale degree 7, going to scale degree 1. This looks exactly the same as species 1, doesn't it? This is exactly what you've memorized already. You've already successfully written a species 1 exercise. This is a good option for you for species 2. So this is good to know that in species 2, when it comes to the cadence, it is very possible to slow down the rhythm. Notice that this is a whole note moving to a whole note, and just write the same as you're used to already, T, do, in whole notes. All right, so this is a good option. All right, it's not the only option. Remember, in a way, species 2 is easier because you have more options. This is actually good news. What's another way that we could end? Here we have the same ending in C major, T, do. This is with the counterpoint above the cantus firmus, 7-1, 2-1. Okay. So this is exactly as we saw already, just in a different key, with the voices swapped. Okay, same as species 1. Okay, so we've got that down. That's easy enough to remember. Is there a different way to end? Well, yes. You don't always have to put that T do on the downbeat. For example, right here, this is, again, we're in the key of C major. This is scale degree 7, moving to scale degree 1. Oh, all right. And here's our scale degree 2. All right. Remember, if you're having trouble identifying your intervals, you can picture yourself tying 2 half notes together, and that might more easily be apparent to you. Okay, but of course we still need a consonance here, but this is a good closing cadence. This works really nicely. Okay, so as long as we have T do either on the strong beat or on the weak beat, we're good. Of course, you need to approach that T do nicely. So we can't just choose any note here. Okay, we need something that works well. Okay, so let's look at some other closing patterns that you might encounter and that you might use yourself. Okay. So as we just saw, we just looked at this in the last example. Sol ti do. Sol ti do. Right. Okay. Here's another piece in. Now notice this is the counterpoint above cantus firmus. So that changes things, doesn't it? We can't use the same notes here. In fact, if we wrote sol ti do, let's try it and see if it would work. If we wrote sol ti do, what interval would we end up with between D and G? Try it on the keyboard. D to G. Oh, it's not a fifth, is it? It's a fourth. Are we allowed to have a dissonance on the downbeat? You're saying, no, you're not allowed to have dissonance on the downbeat. You can only have it on the weak beat. Oh, okay. So that's why we can't use that closing pattern, sol ti do, when the counterpoint is above the cantus firmus. It just doesn't work. What else could we do? Well, here's another solution that's quite common. It is by starting with the fifth again. I should say the harmonic fifth. There we go. So here we have consonants on the downbeat. La ti do. La ti do. And the soprano or counterpoint. Okay, so this is good to remember that these two are not invertible. We couldn't take this and put it here. It didn't work. That's good to remember. Okay, so at a cadence, we still need to satisfy that same the same order of operations that we have consonants on the downbeat. Okay, good. What about in the minor mode? Here we have a piece in a D minor. Actually, this is the same exact thing, isn't it? Compare these two. It's just in a different key. This is la, ti, do. This is la, ti, do. Well, why does this look much different? Why is there so much going on here? Well, it's the same reason why you learned 3 different forms of your minor scale. You learned the natural minor, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. You learned harmonic minor, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And you learned melodic minor, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, which sounds a lot like the major mode, especially the last few notes here when ascending. So when we're ascending to that tonic, it's necessary at the cadence we're talking about, not halfway in between, not in the middle of your exercise, but only at the cadence. It's necessary to adjust. If you're going 6 scale degree, 7 scale degree, 1, you have to adjust in the minor mode. Try to picture it in A minor. What would la ti do look like in A minor? Take a moment. And of course you're saying, oh right, la is F, some kind of F. Oh, but I have to raise it, so it's going to be F sharp, and then T is some kind of G, right? But I have to raise it, so that's G sharp. So that's F sharp, G sharp, A. Okay, right. That would work well. Okay, what about, let's say E minor. Could you find La Ti Do in E minor? This is with the counterpoint above. Take a moment. Okay, so think of your scale. Okay, 6th scale degree, that's some kind of C, but you have to raise it, so that's C sharp. And then some kind of D, right, but you have to raise it, D sharp. Okay, so that's La, Ti, Do, right. Okay, so this might be a good exercise for you you could take these same shapes and move them to another key. You don't have to do all 12 keys, but choose another key or two and see if you can reproduce these closing cadences. That would be really good for you. What's the other way to end? Instead of ending with 2 half notes in the second to last measure, well, just as we saw before, that you have the option of using Ti Do and going back to essentially what looks like species 1. This is making the point that often to approach that, this is such a frequent ending that it's worth noting. You often, in this case, we have the minor mode again. Me, re, do. Right? In order to approach this T, the 7th scale degree, you'll often walk up in the counterpoint. So La Ti, walk up to it. Again, this is nice because it's starting with the consonants on the strong beat, right? That's imperfect consonants. This goes through a dissonance. Remember that in every scale there is at least one tritone. I say at least because in the major mode there will be only one. In the minor mode, other things happen because we're often adjusting notes. So here, when we have the raised 6th scale degree, well, that does turn into a dissonance here. Try it out on the keyboard. F to B. Oh, right, that's dissonance. As long as we have it in the right place in the on the weak beat, then we're fine. Okay, so this is a common ending, so La Ti Do. All right, what about, is that flippable? Can we invert it? Well, actually, yes. This actually works nicely. Again, in the bottom voice, me, re, do. In the top voice, so La Ti Do. Again, this tritone. The interesting thing about a tritone, when you invert it, it inverts to a tritone, but you do spell it differently, right? This was the diminished 5th. Just count the notes. B is 1, C is 2, D is 3, E is 4, F is 5. Okay, so it's 5 notes apart. What about here? Well, this is F to B, so it's a 1. So F is 1, G is 2, A is 3, B is 4. Okay, it's a 4th. So that's augmented 4th. Okay. But it's still in its weak spot, so that's good. That's on the weak beat. Okay. So these are the common endings that you should essentially know already. They're not all that complicated. You can either approach again in first species. You'll often find this ending, same ending, but what's the difference? You'll approach so La Ti Do because you have these extra notes that you can write. What about if you have two notes in the second to last measure in your counterpoint? Well, you can often go so Ti Do. Does that work if you invert it? No, as we saw, it doesn't work. So that's often La Ti Do. Okay, so this would be a good page for you to study before attempting number 2. This is page number 186. I would spend some time with this page. Make sure you played it on the keyboard. And when you're ready, we're going to attempt to write some closing patterns. So this says, write a counterpoint for the following patterns. Use 2-to-1 motion in the first measure of each. This is really important. Use 2-to-1 motion. So that means we need a half note here half note here, whole note here. Okay, so you need to decide what these notes are. Okay, this says same thing. We need half note, then we're going to use probably 2 whole notes. That's what they're pushing you in that direction. So let's see if you can figure out, again, that you need this rhythm, but you have to decide what notes to use. Okay, and this says use two half notes here. So 1, 2. Okay, there we go. There's your rhythm. Okay, so this should not take too long, but make sure you understand what the options are. You could even transpose and see if you can try them out in different keys. Okay, so this should give you a good start with species 2. Feel free to read the chapter at your own time. Next week we're going to start writing our own species 2. For that we need to learn a couple more guidelines, but this is a good start. We know how to end. We know the basics about, it's 2-to-1 counterpoint. We know where to put the consonants. We know where to put the dissonance. Okay, we're off to a good start already. Okay, job well done, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I shall see you shortly. Take care.